Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, beautiful beings. Greetings from Austin, Texas. I'm Madge Vasquez, and I serve as CEO of Mission Capital. We are a capacity builder, nonprofit membership organization, and collective impact backbone here in Central Texas. And it is my deepest joy to be here with my friends, colleagues, and Solidarity sisters as we share a little bit about a program here in Central Texas called WeThrive. And so as we spend the next hour together, I just wanted to start by introducing our beloved panel. And so as we move to the next slide, want to introduce Mimi Stiles, the founder and president of Measure, Dr. Shoket Hamilton, founder and CEO of Rise Child Development Center, and Dr. Sarojani Mohammed, executive director of Capacity Catalyst. And you'll be hearing more from them as we move along in today's agenda. And so on the next slide, we'll talk about the goals for today's workshop. We're really excited to be here at Upswell. We want to thank the Upswell crew, independent sector, for bringing this important topic around BIPOC CEO leadership. So we'll be sharing a little bit about our own lived experience as women of color leaders and how important it is to understand the trends related to BIPOC CEO leadership in our regions. We'll also talk about this beautiful program that we've co-created together that's called WeThrive and is all about peer support and leadership development and resilience here in Central Texas. And then finally, we also want to hold space for some breakouts that we'll be sharing and organizing around what does it take to be a BIPOC leader in today's environment, in this moment? What are some of those challenges and opportunities? And so we want to make sure that we have that courageous space for folks to visit with one another. So as we move to the next slide, I want to share just a little bit about Mission Capital. We, as I shared, are a nonprofit capacity builder intermediary here in Central Texas in Austin. We have been around for 20 plus years and are focused on equipping and connecting mission-driven leaders, organizations, and networks as we all advance racial equity through our collective work. And we're guided by three North Stars. The first is closing the racial leadership gap in our Central Texas nonprofit and philanthropic sector. The second is ensuring that nonprofits are resilient and sustainable as organizations serving our communities. And finally, that last third goal is doing what we're doing today, and that's really expanding and strengthening the capacity of collaborative networks like the one that we're all a part of in WeThrive, but also through the Upswell family. And so that's just a little bit about Mission Capital as we share how WeThrive came about. So on the next slide, want to share kind of the origin story of WeThrive. So back in 2020, this was kind of pre-pandemic, Mission Capital partnered with the Building Movement Project, who's also at this conference here today. And we partnered with them on their Race to Lead survey because we really wanted to understand our own racial leadership gap here in Central Texas. Despite the beautiful diversity, racial, ethnic, and demographic diversity of our state in Texas, what we learned through the data was that less than 25% of our nonprofits were actually led by people of color at an executive level and at that board level. And so that was a really important and kind of concerning data point that we surfaced in our community. On the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the barriers. Another thing the Central Texas Brief taught us was that, as we all know, but it was just highlighted and affirmed by the data, that there are specific barriers when it comes to access to mentorships, and especially access to networks around funding resources with philanthropy. And so our Central Texas brief, showed that our white counterparts, white nonprofit leaders, are much more likely to access funding and be in relationship with funders than BIPOC leaders. And so we activated that data, shared it with our community, and then started thinking about how can we overcome these barriers? How can we create and present solutions that work for us as BIPOC leaders? And that's how WeThrive was born. And so as we move on to the next slide, I'd like to pass it on to my colleague, Mimi Stiles, who partnered with Mission Capital as we began designing this beautiful space specifically for BIPOC CEOs and EDs in Central Texas. And so Mimi will share a little bit about how we created that space.
Yeah, thanks so much, Madge. This has been such an incredible opportunity of just fellowship with the community that I love so much. And so, first of all, I just want to give Madge those kudos for inviting me into this space. WeThrive really was designed as an opportunity to exercise what we do well as a people and what we've always done well as a people. To be honest, we are a collective people. We are a powerful people. We share resources. We've been taught that way. And so we, truly just needed that platform and that real intentional space to do it well. And so that's really what I got out of WeThrive personally. And even as a facilitator, it spoke to me each and every Friday morning. I mean, it almost felt like, and don't get me wrong here, it almost felt like a therapy session that I needed as a Black woman that faces intersecting oppressions every single day in this work that I do. It is not easy waking up doing the work that we do, correct? This is social change work. It's world-changing work. And so we sometimes take it for granted, right? That we actually do have our sisters and our brothers and our everyone else that might be able to provide that sense of just safety, of someone that we can just talk to, lean on. And that's really what WeThrive was. It was about bringing the village together. That's what we did. And so when I say bringing the village together, it's also really important for me to point out that we did a part of WeThrive was at the end of it, we actually did village building. So it was an opportunity to share, this is resources that I have. What do you need? It was as simple as going to your next door neighbor's, door and saying, hey, I need a cup of sugar or I need a couple eggs in order to finish this meal. That's how I was raised, right? And so that's really what we created in WeThrive. Several sessions that focused on leadership building, that focused on topics that ranged from how do you show up in social media to topics that really got down to the nitty gritty and talked about the trauma and the racism that we face every day when it comes to addressing philanthropic harm, right? And so it was an honest space. It was a space of healing. I even want to say that, the funders that provided us the support to do this, they were actually funding for liberation and healing through this program. I'm grateful for that, and more funders need to look at that and use that as an example. But it was an absolutely incredible journey that we've been able to take together.
Thank you, Mimi. Yeah. And as Mimi has just described, we're really fortunate and just excited that we had amazing leaders like Dr. Choquette Hamilton and Dr. Saro Mohammed, who were active participants while also kind of co-creating and curating that space with each cohort. And so to date, we've had 6 cohorts. And Dr. Choquette and Dr. Saro represent members from one of our cohorts. And so I'm going to go ahead and shift us to hearing a a little bit from them about what brought them to WeThrive. So on the next slide, I'll invite our alums to share a little bit about yourself, what brought you to WeThrive, and what impact did WeThrive have on your own personal leadership journey. And Dr. Choquette, I'll invite you to chime in first.
Thank you, Madge. Hi, everyone. So grateful to be here. Thank you, Mimi, for sharing your reflections on the beginning of this journey. I lead a nonprofit called Rise. We are an anti-racist organization created to dismantle inequity in early childhood education. And so, like Mimi, a lot of my work centers on every day thinking about and trying to dismantle inequity, systemic oppression, racism, anti-Blackness, and that's heavy work. And in order for us to continue to thrive, I knew I needed a community that will help me get through the work in a way that I'm able to continue in a sustainable way. I don't believe in martyrism. I feel like that is not the approach that I'm trying to do this work. I'm actually thinking about sustainability. And for me, I know that creating and being in part of communities like WeThrive is what helps me get to be in a sustainable place. And so that's why one of the reasons why I came to WeThrive, I've been involved in lots of different affinity type spaces. And I know the power and the value of them. And WeThrive was that and much more. When I think about what I gained from this, being part of this community, well, practically speaking, we actually were able to receive financial resources because of the connections that I built in this community. I developed deep relationships, particularly with Dr. Saro, where we've since gone on and collaborated on future projects. So really leaning into this idea that we are going to make our Austin community better. And we've done that. And so I know several of the folks in my cohort actually applied and got a grant from a local foundation that I think was made possible, one, because we found out about the grant in our cohort, but also we all, shared our own thoughts around like, what are we going to apply for? And several of us got it. And so it literally led us to resources. In addition to my own health and wellness, Mimi talked about this idea of healing. And that's an ongoing process, especially in the work that we're doing. And so that's certainly how I have benefited from this community and continue to benefit.
Thank you, Dr. Choquette. Saro.
Hi, everyone. I am so happy to be here today among friends. And so what brought me to WeThrive? I come from a different perspective along multiple dimensions. I am a researcher who came from academia. I often describe myself as a recovering academic. And so the nonprofit that I lead and also co-founded as a board member, Capacity Catalyst, our mission is to improve data use in the social sector. And our vision from doing that by matching capacity with need is a thriving, equitable social data ecosystem. And so my research background makes sense for the work that we do. But when I became executive director in just before I joined the WeThrive cohort, actually in the spring of 2020, I knew nothing and had no experience about leading a nonprofit. I had worked with and partnered with nonprofits in the past, and I had worked at a nonprofit most immediately, but had never led a nonprofit. And so part of what brought me to WeThrive was I was at a point where I was participating in a lot of professional development around leadership and leading nonprofits. And many of them that I had participated in, I did not feel like I fully 100% belonged. Either I felt like my gender was not quite the right fit, or my ethnicity was not quite the right fit, my cultural background. I basically felt like many people were telling me how to be more like a straight white man with a certain amount of financial privilege. And there's a part of me that felt like not only could I never be that, but I didn't really want to be that. And so when I saw WeThrive as an opportunity, and I saw that it was being led by Madge and Mimi, I felt like, oh, maybe this will finally be the professional development for someone like me, where I can learn how to be myself and still be a successful nonprofit leader. And that's kind of what I found. So as Dr. Chiquette mentioned, I found my people. I entered a space where I was not being told how to be something that I'm not. I was allowed to be myself and celebrate differences and vent about differences and share experiences without having to be on, right? Without having to use the right language or worry about fragility or anything like that. And also not have to explain the backstory, right? So even if you are in spaces, or when I found myself in spaces where I can be honest, I've often had to do a lot of like explanation of like, here's the context and here's the players and here's why, and right before I could get to the thing. And in this group, I didn't have to do any of that because everyone got it. Like, like I could just say the thing and people understood, what the actual story was. And so being in that space and having those Friday mornings, I can't remember how many hours it added up to, but it made like a real concrete difference in my life and in my day-to-day, and just the weight of what I was approaching, on a minute-by-minute basis. It was a place where I could set things aside and process and commune and celebrate and build relationships with people that I'm still in partnership with now and I still work with. And now I kind of count as friends in addition to colleagues. I thought I knew, even though I was new to nonprofit leadership, I thought I knew almost all of the nonprofit leaders of the global majority here in Austin, especially the ones that were working on sort of, data ecosystem type work. And no one else in my cohort was someone that I had a relationship with or even had met before the cohort. And all of them now I have worked on projects outside of WeThrive with. And it also, I think the impact that it had on my leadership journey is that it made me understand that there were some ideas that I had that I felt like were maybe too radical, right?
Mhm.
Why should we pursue most of our fundraising on one Tuesday at the end of the year from individual donors, right? When wealth is not concentrated among individual donors, and all of this wealth has been extracted from our communities. Why should we support and propagate these systems of oppression and of wealth hoarding in order to do right by everyone, not just the people that we serve? And those ideas, like I never felt like I could say those things out loud. And I was very careful, especially with my own board, who at the time was not led by a person of the global majority. But in this circle, right, what I learned was like, sometimes you have to just say the thing. And you're not the only one having these thoughts. And so you will find your support, and you will, through that support, I think I developed the courage to really stand by a lot of convictions and principles that I don't think I would have been able to in the same way. I think it was easy. It would have been easy for me at that point in my journey to sort of buy into, this is how it's done, so this is how you must do it.
Thank you, Saro.
Yeah, thanks so much, Saro. There's so often, when we're in the nonprofit journey, we kind of approach the funding community like they have the solution, right, for us to meet these very complex issues within our own communities. But we really have to think about it in a different way. And that's what I really took from WeThrive, is that, we have the solution. We have the intent knowledge about our communities. Matter of fact, I'm going to say a couple of things, right? BIPOC leaders are the best positioned to do the work because we understand the experiences and the needs of our community. We are best positioned to do the work because we have a deep commitment to social justice. It is in our DNA. We are best positioned to do the work because we have the skills and the understanding. We have we are born with the empathy and the clear understanding of what we need and why. We are best positioned to do the work because we have community. And so, and we are the community. And those are just a couple of the golden nuggets that I took from WeThrive, and that I'm continuing to kind of build a list out of why we're so powerful, right? And honestly, throughout the WeThrive program, I changed my language. I know, I'm now saying as a language, powerful Black, Brown, and Indigenous led organizations, powerful Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities. And I feel like that's a piece of what I gained too from WeThrive, is learning new languages, learning from one another. So yeah, incredible.
Thank you, Mimi.
Yeah.
And before we move into breakout sessions, I'm going to invite Adam, our Upswell tech support, to let us know if we've got anyone in moderation, whether we need to open up that channel.
Yeah, it looks like we have 2 people in there if you wanted to add them at the bottom there.
Okay. All right. So we're inviting a few folks to the stage before we move on to breakouts. Did that work, Adam?
It looks like you let them in, but they may have not shared their camera. So if we want to just move forward, maybe after they'll come back.
Okay, perfect. So we want to make sure that we have some rich time in breakouts. So Adam and the crew are going to help us organize into breakouts of 5 folks or so, and each of us as panelists will join a breakout as well. And we'll be able to dive deep on a couple of questions. And so you'll see the breakout questions on the screen. We want to hear what's resonated from today's conversation when you think about your own leadership journey. And what advice or support can you offer your peers here today? And so we'll invite you to reflect on those 2 questions as we all get organized into breakout sessions. And then we'll pick up the moderation folks after the breakout session. Welcome. I know folks are coming back. Hope you all had rich discussions in your breakout sessions. And Adam, you just let me know when everybody's back and we'll start the debrief of breakouts.
Amazing. Yeah, I think they're on their way back. I think we actually do have most people back. So.
Okay. Wonderful. Let's see. Let's get our panelists back as well. Okay, and Evie, I see you in the moderation. If you want to come on stage, I know we were just in a small group, so I'm going to invite you in as we, okay, there we go. All right, it looks like she might be off, but we'll open it up to reflections, insights from breakout sessions. What insights came from your small groups? Anyone who wants to to chime in, feel free. You can come to the moderation stage. Evie?
Sure. Yeah. I think one thing, I think, again, right at the end of our breakout session, I would say that understanding that, what BIPOC-led organizations really need is to carve out space for healing and liberation. And that should even be included in your budget. It should be really concretely spelled out for you. And also that when, and funders, on the funders' perspective, they should be supporting more flexible general operating support organizations to help forward, to help foster that space of liberation and healing. I think being more flexible in funds. And Madgie, you did give the example of how COVID-19 funding was able to be rapidly flexible in a way that it wasn't before. If they can do it for that situation, then they can do that going forward for all BIPOC organizations that need to carve out more space for their own staff. So I think that's really my big takeaway from our breakout.
Thank you, Evie. Thanks for your reflections and your leadership. Other insights, comments, what resonated?
Madge, one of the things that we talked about in my breakout room is what does racial healing look like in the workplace? So similar to what Evie's talking about, making sure that we create spaces to dedicate ourselves around racial healing. And those things could look different in a white-led organization compared to a BIPOC-led organization or a majority BIPOC environment. And so what that could look like is like affinity groups that show up in lots of different ways that are resourced. So one example we had was there was in Slack, that was a way that we communicated that we had a BIPOC Slack channel where we would cut up and act a fool that would look different than other Slack channels, right? And in a or if we're having a conversation around like a DEI conversation, that the reflection happens in affinity spaces as opposed to whole group. We also talked about how there is opportunity for racial healing in cross-racial spaces, but with the right level of resourcing around establishing community agreements. How do we facilitate that conversation to account for things like white fragility and the white gaze, but then also this idea of bridging. So someone in our group considered themselves to be a bridge builder, I think a couple of folks, and what that meant to advance the work in a cross-racial space.
Love that. Thank you, Choquette. Thanks for sharing those insights and the wisdom from that breakout session. Yeah, and it's interesting. One of the things that I was thinking about as you all were sharing as panelists about your leadership journeys is that, we all have very unique leadership journeys given, I think, amongst our group, we have women of color who are founders, who have this bold vision and are carrying that bold vision forward. We also have BIPOC leaders in our cohorts who were maybe the first person of color to lead in their organization, as I was. It was the third CEO, first person of color, first woman of color to lead Mission Capital in its 20-year history. And that presents a different dynamic, right? And so when I think about healing and liberation for me as a woman of color leader in a white legacy institution, developing white allyship amongst, the staff and board and community partners, that was really helpful. For me, it supported my leadership, and that might look different for other folks. Yeah. Other insights, ways to support your peers. What are you taking back to your communities? What might not be serving us that we need to transform. That's right.
Madge, so I'm looking at the chat, and Danielle talks about how she's at an organization where, you know, as a Black woman, she's working with people that really desire equity, but it's still challenging to work with them. And so in my experience leading diversity, equity, inclusion work, there tends to be a gap between our aspirational selves' desire to advance equity, even be an anti-racist organization, than actually being that organization or doing the work to get there. And that space can feel really hard and challenging, especially if you're a person of color experiencing that. And that is certainly something that is a challenge when we're thinking about this and creating these affinity spaces where you can heal, you know, go through some of this racial healing. In reaction to that, one of the resources I did share in my group was a book called My Grandmother's Hands. Excellent resource that has practical strategies to think about what racism does to our body and how we can actually metabolize it. Yeah. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Shoket.
I think another thing that's relevant, and I think I did the breakout rooms wrong, or maybe I was in a very small breakout room, but one of the things that I've experienced that I think is relevant to this question is the difference between the approach and the perspective when we are working towards anti-racism as someone who has the experience and lives in a white body versus someone who is of the global majority. And I think it's really what I've experienced is that when I'm in majority white spaces, the conversation is very externalized, right? So it's like outward facing and like racism exists in the world and how do we change systems and how do we change other people? And I think something that has helped, if I know I'm in a space where I am safe and where my allies have good intentions and I understand that they really are desiring of equity, I actually just point that out, right? And I talk about the fact that those of us who do not live in white bodies don't have the privilege of externalizing this issue. Like it's something that we live every minute of every day. We step out the door and we wear our skin. And so I think that's helpful in sort of recentering the conversation and also helping to get folks, everyone, into a mindset of self-reflection and sort of internal action first, without being overwhelmed by the enormity of what it could feel like.
Thanks, Sato.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Sarah. If I can just kind of pop in here for a moment. I know that our time is kind of winding down. I saw the little banner announcement and everything, but there's something that I've been sharing just within the last month or so. And it's just these couple of nuggets, right, that I'd love for folks to kind of be able to reflect on. And the first one, it kind of speaks to what Sarah was saying. It's like that outside perspective and looking in, right? And what does that mean for us? For me, it always kind of it brings me to this, like, so I've been saying a measure of equity is the absence of fear, and solving for that absence is not, I shouldn't have to own that, right? A measure of equity is the absence of pain, right? And again, that's not me, that I should not have to own that. And that's that, you know, and so I'm not, yeah, but there is a piece of this where that can be shared, right, with all of us. And for me, it's the measure of equity is also the presence of joy. And so what that means to me is that it, you know, to get to joy, it means that you have gone through some things. It means that you have you know, trudged through the mud. You have seen some things. You have been in pain and you have been hurt. And I don't know if you are the hurt her or if you're the one hurt, but but joy cometh in the morning. Right. And so what that means for me is that that's something that I can lean into. So that's the question that I think that you need to ask yourself is, how am I creating joy? How am I creating joy within my organization? How am I creating joy in my own leadership every single day, realizing all of the mess that I have to go through in order to get here and stay here?
Mm-hmm.
Right? How am I creating joy? Joy holds space for that pain and for that fear. Joy holds space for empathy. Remembering that joy in my thought, joy is the celebration of anti-racism. Joy is the celebration of anti-racism. And so how do we get there as an organization? And not put the burden on people that have been traumatized or oppressed to have to earn it. How do we ensure that those that are leading our affinity groups, or leading or putting on the Black History Month program are actually sustained to do it? And we're just not capitalizing once again, or creating a business case for our equity goals. Can't be a business case. In order for us to be more human, we have to be more human. It's a collective mandate to build joy. And so, those are my thoughts. And I'm hoping that you kind of go back with those and think about, how do I solve for that? How do I solve for creating that presence of joy? Madge, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Mimi. Thank you, Mimi. Well, it's been a delight, folks, to spend the last hour with you. Thank you for sharing your own wisdom and leadership journeys. And know that we are here, all of us. We've got our profiles in the Upswell system. Feel free to reach out if there's anything that any of us can do to support you as you thrive. And so who thrives? We thrive. And we've all led through amazing times of uncertainty and pandemic and national racial reckoning. And the work will continue. And we are here, resilient and ready as peer leaders in the work. And I'll invite my panelists to share a word of advice or encouragement as we all wrap up this time together. So if there's a word, a beautiful word or sentiment for this group as we send them off, whoever wants to start, and we'll just do a round robin.
I'm going to end with joy.
Thank you.
To build on that, hope. If we can't have hope, we don't have anything. So keep going.
Thanks, Choquette. Lado.
Relationships.
Courage and healing, people. Courage and healing. All right. Thank you so much. And again, best wishes, strength on the journey.